I'm here with Trigs, a community grants council member at Octant. Also, he is a co-DAO council member, which is the DAO behind Coordinate, and he's the co-founder of Cleomedes DAO as well. Today, we're going to talk about how entrepreneurs can get involved in the world of crypto, which is a new form of money, redefining financial independence. Unlike the traditional financial system ran by the government, crypto is ran by the people. We're also entering a new phase of the internet called web3, where online communities manage a treasury as a collective to support ideas from all kinds of entrepreneurs by providing grants. Now, unlike traditional grants, often limited by government criteria, Web3 opens up more opportunities to secure funding or gain a paid role based on your skills. You can submit a proposal to a Web3 community and essentially create your own job. On the New Money Podcast, you'll learn how to earn crypto without needing to buy in. You can earn your income in Web3 and become your own bank. This podcast is in partnership with OpenCampus, a platform redefining education by improving access to learning, creating better earning opportunities for educators, and helping individuals showcase their skills without traditional degrees. With tools like on-chain verifiable credentials and publisher NFTs, OpenCampus allows educators to monetize their courses while both the educators and the learners who purchase the courses earn royalties from resales. Their upcoming EDU Chain, launching as a layer 3 on Arbitrum, will be creating a new opportunity for educators and for career growth as well, making learning more accessible and rewarding for everyone. On the New Money Podcast, our goal is to help you earn a full-time salary in Web3 by contributing to communities, and we're speaking with individuals that have figured out how to do it. And today, we have Trigs with us. Trigs, I'm really happy to have you on and excited to learn more about your journey in Web3.
Yeah, thanks. Excited to be here. It's always fun to get a chance to kind of dig back into the annals of history and remember, why am I here? What did bring me to this crazy madhouse? But yeah, so excited to jump into it.
Yeah, man. So, how did you first get involved in crypto in the first place? And more specifically, how did you get involved in DAOs? When did you begin making money in this industry without trading?
Yeah, so kind of my origin story is kind of funny to me, I guess. I get a kick out of it. I was helping a friend of mine buy a car. This was in like early 2020, I guess. It was kind of like I don't know, the early part of the bull run when things were just starting to kick off. And when when my buddy handed over the stack of cash to this guy to buy his car, he was like, "All right, guys, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. What I'm gonna do with this money is buy Dogecoin, and you should do that too." And my buddy and I looked at each other and were just like, "What is this crackpot dude talking about?" So I went home and I researched Dogecoin. I mean, like I knew what Bitcoin was. I remember when the white paper came out. I was working in the tech industry back then. Everyone was talking about it. And I've always been into economics, so it was like interesting to me, but it seemed like a pretty like out there experiment. My take on Bitcoin when the white paper came out was like, well, if everyone agreed to use this thing, it might be kind of cool, but like, how are you going to get everybody to actually use this thing? And then I got out of the tech industry not too long after that because I was just totally burnt out on tech. So I wasn't really like following along or paying attention. I had never heard of Ethereum when it came out or any of the stuff that went down with Bitcoin over the years. Just kind of, forgot about it. I remember when they bought the pizza, I was like, oh man, this is actually like going somewhere now. But anyway, so fast forward to 2020, this guy is going to put a stack of cash into Dogecoin. And so I started researching it, learning about Ethereum, and I was like, whoa, this is crazy. This like the stuff that has happened since the last time I paid attention is just out of this world. And it sucked me back in hard. I mean, it was like all the things that drove me out of the tech industry was exactly what was being addressed with smart contracts and the Web3 kind of like new work movement and all that kind of stuff. So I was just like totally green pilled instantly and haven't looked back since, really. So I guess to get to how I got involved in DAOs specifically. So one of the first things that I did after jumping into the crypto world was I got connected with this investment club on Harmony Chain. I don't know if anybody's familiar with Harmony, but yeah, it was like The whole like sharding thing was a big deal before Ethereum figured out all their L2s and dank sharding and all that or whatever. So Harmony was interesting to me just because it was accessible. It was cheap. It was a small ecosystem. And it was a little bit intimidating jumping into the middle of Ethereum, like right in the beginning of a bull run. It's just like everything was crazy. So it was fun for me to play around with this little like side chain where it's a little bit lower stakes. And so I got involved in this investment club. They were kind of like trying to do a different take on the whole like Olympus Ohm 3-3 kind of investment thing or whatever. They were doing a little bit different deal, different kind of style bonding. Um, and I thought it was just interesting because they were actually using the money to manage like DeFi investments instead of just having like stable coins as a reserve to make a reserve currency. They were making like an active investment treasury. And the whole point was like all the members of the DAO were the ones that decided what investments we did or didn't do and managed those decisions. And then, the core team would execute it. And so that sucked me in and just like, how do we manage this like decentralized decision-making process? That was really what was interesting to me about it. And eventually it ended up being invited into the core team for that project after, I don't know, like 6 months of being a community contributor. And that kind of kickstarted my DAO career, I guess you could say. The project eventually ended up closing. We started getting to the point where we realized, like from a legal standpoint, what we were doing was in a gray area, and the bull run burst and the DeFi bubble collapsed. So our entire business model kind of went out the window with that as well. So it was interesting to be able to like come into a DAO as just a random community member who knew absolutely nothing about crypto. I was so new. The first time I tried to stake my Harmony tokens to a validator, I accidentally sent all of my tokens to the validator's wallet. And I was just like, where did it all go? I thought I was doing the right thing. It's just like, that's how clueless I was. And I messaged the guy and he was super cool and he sent it back. He was like, oh no, I thought somebody bought one of my NFTs or something. But yeah, it was fun to kind of have that low stakes entrance into crypto and make a bunch of mistakes and learn how to do things wrong all over the place. And then Harmony got hacked and the entire chain collapsed. And so I moved on to the Cosmos ecosystem. And that's when I came across the Cleomedes, the people that were setting up the Cleomedes team. So I transitioned. They invited me into that project and I helped them kind of structure the initial launch of the DAO. And yeah, it's pretty much been DAOs ever since.
Nice. Now, that's an interesting story, especially with you getting involved in the Cosmos ecosystem as well. An ecosystem we don't really hear too much about in the Ethereum space, but I do understand that the Cosmos ecosystem is like the internet of blockchains, right? And so, like one of my favorite projects within that ecosystem is Akash network. So allows for people to have a decentralized experience similar to like utilize like a decentralized cloud computing experience. So instead of using Amazon Web Services, which the majority of today's Web3 infrastructure is on, it's a breath of fresh air knowing that there's a decentralized alternative to that. So big shout outs to the Cosmos ecosystem and what they got going on over there. And I wasn't really too aware of the DAOs over there. So you said there's Cleomedes DAO. What are you guys doing over there at Cleomedes? And so just to give some more insight.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Cosmos is a crazy ecosystem. Honestly, I would say that DAO activity is like leaps ahead in the Cosmos ecosystem. You just don't realize it because there's so few people actually in the Cosmos ecosystem compared to the Ethereum and other places. But because of the way the chains in Cosmos do governance, every single Cosmos chain is a DAO because governance is managed by the stake. Like with Ethereum, if you stake Ethereum to a validator, you can get your 5% reward or whatever, but you're not controlling anything. You don't vote on any on-chain governance. All that stuff is managed separately from the staking part. But in the Cosmos, the chain itself is managed by the retail users who stake their tokens on the chain. Now, of course, token distribution and whales and validators who have massive stakes. So like all these things come into play. So you see all the dynamics of like capture resistance that come into a DAO. And so I wouldn't say that all the Cosmos chains are effective DAOs, but they are actually technically DAOs. And so it's just like a massive DAO experiment going on a protocol level in the Cosmos ecosystem, which is what really attracted me to that ecosystem, because I'm so DAO, focused. And so getting to see how these different protocols are managing community-run decision-making and fund allocation. I mean, essentially all of these DAOs are also grants, because every single chain has a foundation that issues grants to projects in the form of their protocol token. And so there's all of these DAO type decision making, fund allocation stuff. It's all happening in the Cosmos. So that's what Cleomedes, we are an infrastructure project who runs validators on a lot of these different chains in the Cosmos. And then we have our own project token that manages the decisions that we make as a validator. And so our thesis kind of is basically it gives people a way to be even more engaged in the decision making, because like I said, with token distributions, like validators tend to make all the decisions in Cosmos. Actual retail users don't have a whole lot of sway when it comes to voting on chain, just because of the amount of tokens that they have access to. Validators get a vote with all of the tokens that are delegated to them, and users can override the validator's vote by issuing their own vote, and it'll remove their vote weight from the validator's vote and put it towards whatever the individual votes for. But let's be honest, the vast majority of people aren't voting on on-chain governance because they don't even know what's going on. If it's like a protocol upgrade, like here's some lines of code that we're going to push to the protocol that changes such and such features, the average person just looks at that and they're just like, okay, whatever, you guys do what you're going to do. So, most of the time the validators just make all the decisions. And so for Cleomedes, the idea was, let's have a validator that is actually controlled by, the community of people who are delegating to that validator. So we have this like complex algorithm and all kinds of stuff that we run in the back end for issuing out tokens to all of our delegators across all of our chains. And it kind of all accumulates into a vote weight distribution for people who are, choosing us as their validator. And then we have our own proposals that we put up, and people vote with our project token on what direction we want to go, what chains we want to add, which ones we want to leave, all that kind of stuff. So it's been really fun to just kind of like experiment with community decision making in an ecosystem where it actually makes a difference.
Absolutely. And how simple is it to become a validator for Cleomedes DAO? So like, let's say somebody listening to this podcast, they want to get involved in Web3. They have some experience with trading, but they actually want to be involved in the community and earn some income regularly by doing so. Like, how can they do that by becoming a validator at Cleomedes DAO?
Yeah, so your question is on the money. There's a couple of clarifying points I'll make. So Cleomedes, we have our infrastructure that we run is centralized in the sense that we don't our community members aren't each spinning up their own validator and becoming a part of our DAO that way. We have one guy who's our infrastructure manager who heads up all of the validator operations itself, like managing the actual machines, the servers, and making the updates and all that kind of stuff. And we have a facility that he runs all his bare metal equipment in. And so for other people to join the validator, and this was something that we kind of leaned into when we started the project, because the majority of people who are interested in this kind of stuff don't necessarily have the infrastructure experience to run physical servers and manage the technical side of a node operation. And so by tapping into experts who have domain knowledge around how to do that effectively, we take that technical limitation out of the picture and then open up the door for contributions of all different types. So like, I don't know anything about managing the infrastructure, but I do BD and community development. So as a business developer, I'm going out there and communicating with the chains that we validate with and finding projects that have potential uses for our chains and trying to sell our chains to those projects. Akash is one of the chains that we validate. So I'm constantly like trying to shill Akash to people like, oh, you need cloud computing? You should use Akash. It's decentralized. And so that's how I contribute to Cleomedes. And there's people who do marketing stuff, they do graphics, people that do even just engaging on governance forums. If you are a fan of a particular chain and you just want to be really involved in the governance forum for that chain, you can be a member of Cleomedes and represent Cleomedes on that governance forum. And it brings the authority and the recognition of Cleomedes with to that person so that they can, be more effective in their role as, influencing the governance of that chain. And it also keeps us connected then because we have representatives of our community going out and bringing information back to the collective whole that they've gathered while they're out in these, various places that they're personally interested in. So to speak to like how do you become a contributor, really it's a matter of like recognizing what it is that you want to do. There's opportunities everywhere in this ecosystem, and there's no one skill set that's more important than others. There's more demand for certain skill sets. That's definitely true. Like developers are always in demand, but not everybody can be a developer. Not everybody can be, an infrastructure operator. But the other skill sets are equally important because without business development, none of these projects are ever going to go anywhere. Without marketing, without people engaging in community forums, and that's my advice really to anybody who wants to be involved as a contributor to some sort of DAO is first just like look at what it is that you're good at that you want to do, or what do you want to learn. You don't even have to already be good at it. It could be something new that you want to develop. A lot of our contributors, they came into the DAO and they developed a skill set that they didn't have when they first joined because they found something interesting that they wanted to dive into, and then the community just supported them in developing that skill set.
For sure, yeah. Like, I didn't even become a web developer until I got involved in the space. I figured that that would make me more valuable, but like you said, no skill is more important than the other one because it don't matter how well your infrastructure is set up or how amazing your tech really is for your project. If nobody has heard about it, then then it doesn't exist essentially. So, like all the skills that people have already developed within the what we call the Web 2 world, the like traditional entrepreneur, somebody that's not already involved in Web 3. If you're a marketer there, even though Web3 marketing slightly differs from Web2 marketing, but you still have a good understanding of how to market and tell a story, or if you have really good social skills, like if you have strong social skills, you could definitely become a business developer. And so you could take the skills that you have already have acquired in what we would call the regular world or Web2 world and apply it to Web3. And the difference is with Web3, it's a bit more open, not a bit, a lot more open than Web 2. So typically, at least from my experience, to land a role, it came from pretty much passing vibe checks and establishing some friendships within these different Web3 communities. So I'm curious. I mean, you have a few different roles here. We could mention Cleomedes as well since we're currently talking about it. But I would also like to know, how did you land the role as a community grants council lead at Octant, and what types of projects do you guys typically fund?
Yeah, so you really hit the nail on the head when you mentioned that it's about like building friendships, and to me that is one of the most important parts of the Web3 ecosystem that's different from the trad world, especially in the tech industry. And it's what keeps me engaged in this community because you have choices, you have options on what it is you want to spend your time doing. And for myself personally, one of the biggest priorities for me is I want to enjoy the work that I do and the people that I work with. And in a tech world, in a corporate world, you don't really have that flexibility. You kind of have to just like accept the team that is doing the thing that you're hired to do, and that's the way it goes. I mean, to some degree you're going to have to do that no matter where you go, right? But there's so much going on in the Web3 world that if you're not vibing with a specific DAO or team, just go find a different one. There's a million people that'll replace you in the DAO that you're in, and there's a million other DAOs that'll accept you with open arms. All you have to do is go find them. Like, and it's not like there isn't any like loyalty or commitment that's necessary for this, because effective teams develop commitment and loyalty by working together with people that they truly care about working with. And so that's essentially how I got into the Octant community. I mean, I was familiar with the Octant community when they first spun off. If anybody knows about the Octant history, they were a spin-off project from the Golem Foundation from like long ago. And when Octant first was, they had their name. I came across them just because I was researching anybody doing interesting stuff with governance, and so I kind of saw what they were working on. But I was like getting knee deep into Cleomedes at the time, so I didn't have bandwidth to jump in on it. It just kind of like stayed on the side burner. And then I joined the Kernel community. And Kernel is just like a social onboarding kind of networking group that they do these cohorts every year, or they have like seasons where they onboard a new cohort of people into the ecosystem. And it's just a really great way to build friendships with like-minded people. That was really the biggest part. Like so many people that I met during the kernel onboarding, like everybody was of a shared mindset in some way, shape, or form. There, were differences obviously in different focuses, and it was fun to see people with all these different backgrounds and all of these different trajectories as to where they were going with their career, but they were all using the same kind of principles that all reflect more of the values of Web3 in some form. And so it was really inspiring getting to see all of these people with these shared values, but different experiences and different skills, applying them to try to accomplish, something that hasn't been done before, really. And so I ran into James in the kernel. He was in the same kernel cohort as me, and he was talking about what they were doing with Octant. And I was like, oh man, Octant, I kind of remember these guys. It's been a while. So I started chatting with James, and we built a little bit of a rapport just from engaging together in the kernel cohort. And it eventually led to me jumping on board as they launched their first season of the Grants Council for Octant.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I would definitely encourage anybody here listening is to actually become vocal within these communities. Something like if you come across a crypto project that really interests you, uh, see if they have a Discord or a Telegram. Get involved there. See whenever they're gonna have their weekly syncs. A lot of these organizations do meet on a regular basis, and it's open for anybody to pretty much join for the most part. And yeah, get vocal, make some friends, and you'll be surprised like what type of role you can land, and you can actually find a way to earn a full time a living in Web3. And like you mentioned before, if there's a DAO that you don't like or you're not really meshing well with that community, you could definitely go. I won't say no names, but like there's a community that I contributed to, and I remember like one of the core members who was working together, and for one, I haven't received any compensation there when I was working there. Not yet. At least it was promised to me, but I was making a lot of connections there. I would say that, but what was told we were working on something, and I remember him telling me that like one member from this particular DAO, he was saying that I don't understand how somebody could be full time DAO. I don't understand how somebody could work in the DAO space and earn a living. I said, well, that's my sign to go. Like that was like a red flag to me. I was like, I'm never gonna figure this out then, if like not never, but like hanging around this person, I know that I'm not necessarily going to achieve what I want to achieve. And I got more active within Bankless DAO, and I met one of my best friends within the Web3 space. His name is Walshy. He used to do BD for Lido. Now he's over at QuickNode. And yeah, he taught me everything I know about consulting, like being a business consultant. We just really hit it off during a call during a relationships meeting, and then he asked me to hop on a separate call, and then because I was talking about node operations, I was a fan of this DAO. It has sunsetted since this conversation back in 2022, but the DAO is called Node Star DAO, and so I was talking all about node operations and stuff like that. So he knew that at least I understood something about nodes, in which this community we pretty much only talk about business development and partnerships between DAOs. But he was impressed that I was talking about node operations, and then that led to another conversation, and then we just became good friends. And then from there, he just looked out for certain roles and opportunities for me. So big shout outs to him, and just did this space in general. I like that. One thing that I've noticed about the people here in Web3 for the most part, a lot of people are very optimistic. At least that's something that like we all pretty much like share in common. So like when you join a DAO, a lot of people they're going to welcome you with open arms because for one, the space, even though like more people are starting to talk about crypto now as prices are going up and Bitcoin's over 100,000, but like it's still a very small community at the end of the day. Like the people that's actually in Web3 making a difference and building within this community is still very small. So they will welcome you with open arms, and yeah, you'll be surprised what opportunities can come out of that. And so I'm assuming like with you becoming a lead of the grants council, was it pretty much like a vibe check type of thing, or was there like a specific skill that you needed to acquire in order to obtain that role? And I guess what before answering that one, I might as well just loop this in here as well, because it pretty much ties into the whole like skill set and attestations and things of that nature in order to verify that you're able to hold a particular role.
The educational system is ripe for disruption. Instead of holding your academic achievements as paper certificates, imagine having a secure, open database where your expertise is easily recognized and verified. That's what EDU Chain by OpenCampus offers, a reliable way to showcase your skills that employers can trust. Plus, with publisher NFTs, another feature native to EDU Chain, educators can create and monetize their courses, while both teachers and students earn royalties from resales, making it easier than ever for educators to generate revenue. And here's something I'd like you to check out: OpenCampus ID. It's your personal digital identifier that lets you control and proudly display your academic achievements online. Head over to opencampus.xyz to learn more and claim your OpenCampus ID today. Take charge of your educational journey and join the future of learning with OpenCampus.
So OpenCampus, they're launching EDU Chain, which is a layer 3 blockchain on Arbitrum with features like publisher NFTs that lets creators tokenize educational courses and they can earn royalties on the resales. Now, if you were to begin to design and launch a course as a publisher NFT to train someone to become a grants council lead, what would that look like?
Yeah, that's a really great question. Actually, it is timely because it fits into exactly kind of what I'm working on for Octant's Grant Council right now in terms of just like designing a future onboarding path for bringing in council leads and other council members. Um, one of the, I mean, there's some basic skills that are definitely kind of necessary across the board for being a grant council member. But there's also a really wide range, my personal take at least, and this is something just that I've seen working in this ecosystem for a little while. For a grant council, one of the most important things is diversity of perspective, because everybody brings something different to the table. So in terms of creating a course to create like a certification for being a grant council person, it's challenging to like really narrow it down to a specific set of skills. I mean, one of the biggest things is communication skills, because you're going to have to communicate with other council members and with the projects that are applying for your grant. And so having the ability to manage that process it is challenging. Like you were saying before, like some people have just like a natural sense of social skills that translate well into business development. And in the same way, being a council member, you have to have that kind of social nature where you're able to connect with people, have productive conversations. It doesn't necessarily have to be face to face, like, you know, live chat kind of conversations. It can be async. I mean, that's one of the flexible parts of Web3 that I love, is that you can kind of meet people where they're at. But you have to have that flexibility to do everything. You know, if you're not very good at keeping up with async text communication, you might fall behind as a grant council person, because there's a lot of async text communication to keep up with everything. But you also have to be able to engage in video calls, because there's going to be group sessions where you have to hash stuff out. So having the ability to navigate all of the technical parts of using these video share apps. I mean, there's like a million, right? I mean, a lot of people use Google Meet or Zoom or whatever, but then there's also all these other secondary people are trying to de-Google their life and use these other platforms. So having the flexibility to be able to jump through the hoops, the technical hoops of just using all of these communication tools is definitely challenging. It's really frustrating when you spend the first like 15 minutes of a meeting trying to get everybody functioning on a technical level just so you can actually hear each other and talk and work through all the microphone issues. So, setting up a functional microphone, having a good headset, having a computer that has good internet access, like those are some basic things that, you could prove that through an education course by having some sort of interactive, way for people to prove that they have the ability to navigate those things. That would be a really powerful certification, I think, just to like start as a baseline. But beyond that, I mean, analytical skills is really important. Being able to put yourself in the context of other people's projects and see things from their perspective to understand why they're applying. It's really hard as a grant council person because you don't really see the context that the applicant is coming from, right? You have to put yourselves in their shoes. You have to kind of imagine what their challenges look like and what their product or goals that they're trying to accomplish, looks like. And as a council person, a lot of times it's easy to just kind of like see it from your perspective, right? Like as if I'm an Octant council member, I know what's important to Octant. And so every applicant that comes in, I look at it from that perspective. But that really narrows things down if you just only focus on your perspective of your project. And so if you're able to like think outside of that box and imagine the creativity that's out there from these other applicants and see what they see, it can open up the doors for Octant to grow in a new way that we never saw possible, because we allowed this applicant to come in and we didn't shut them out because it didn't make sense right away. We were able to like see it from their perspective and see what they're bringing to the table, but then also help them understand what's important to us too, right? Like it's a two-way street. We can't just throw money at every single interesting idea and hope that it turns into something. That's where the analytical stuff comes in. So being able to kind of break down how to merge this new idea from a new perspective into the existing goals and structure of the organization that you work for. It's a really challenging balance to kind of prioritize both, because as a council member, you're not just beholden to the project that is sponsoring these grants. You're also beholden to the community that is applying for these grants. Both sides have to flourish, and the communication has to flow between them so that you're moving in a right direction. Because it's really easy to throw money at a project and then just ignore them and walk away, and it never goes anywhere. And that was just a waste of a grant, right? For a grant to be successful, there has to be follow through. So there's another skill that comes into it in terms of just like the diligence of tracking. If an applicant has been approved and they've been provided funding, you got to stay in communication with them. You can't forget about them. You have to follow up and see how their progress is going, help them with obstacles that they're running into. It's very similar to being a good VC in that sense. Funding allocation doesn't stop as soon as the funds are allocated. You have to have some relevance of awareness of what it takes to accomplish those goals. And as a funder, it's really up to you to make sure that the people that you're funding are following through with what they, say that they were going to do.
Absolutely. Yeah, so it seems like to become a grants council member, or a grants council lead rather, like it's actually obtainable for somebody new in Web3 if they have strong communication skills and strong analytical skills. So I guess like to do that today, they would have to pretty much be convincing of that, or like somebody within the council have to know like, okay, yeah, this person would be spot on for this role. But I guess like with a certification, if you can already prove that, that could pretty much like help you along the process faster, so you don't have to spend months. Because like right now, I noticed like to obtain a role, at least like from my experience, from obtaining a role within any DAO, it took months and months of actually gaining the community's trust and respect before I just go asking for a role or for grant funding. I typically like for my presence to be felt within that community. But the way that I'm envisioning the future, because I haven't really seen certifications used that often yet in Web3. It's pretty much like a word of mouth type of space. But if certifications were used effectively, then that should cut down time. if you can already prove that you're, high level within these skills and you have done this before, then hopefully that will smooth the process of obtaining that role. But yeah, so would you say, like, for somebody new to Web3, that becoming a grants council lead is something that they can actually strive for, since you don't necessarily have to be very tech savvy to land such a role?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would definitely encourage people who are interested who don't have a lot of experience to approach the idea of joining the grant council. Being a grant council lead maybe requires a little bit of experience having served on a grant council, but just getting into a grant council, I think, is fairly accessible um, at this stage. I'll say. For myself personally, like where I see my career path going with grant funding and what I'm trying to do for Octant, and also helping with the CoDAO for the coordinate team, and and I mean, in the same extent, Clio Media's, because we're going into funding allocation. I mean, every DAO is a funding allocation tool, so it applies to all DAOs really. So, but for me, it's about building up that web of trust. Like you said, the process that you described, joining a DAO, you have to kind of establish yourself, build some credibility with the ecosystem, get to know other people so they recognize you and see the skills and value that you have. Being able to jump into it with like official attestations that are verifiable, that show like this is what I've done. I mean, that would be extremely helpful for sure. That's essentially how I got the CoDAO for the coordinate team, how I got invited into that. It was just because they recognized the participation that I've already had in the ecosystem with Octant and Cleomedes and other projects. And even though it wasn't an on-chain attestation, there was an understanding of attested value for my contributions in the ecosystem. Having that on-chain would definitely simplify that and make it, having a verifiable, like, I would love that. I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things that we're missing, is that kind of like verifiable credential thing on chain. But it is tricky to get there, and there's no like silver bullet that, like, if we just build a tool that allows for on-chain attestations and credentials, it doesn't instantly solve the problem. And I think that's why we're not seeing it used. There's a bunch of projects out there that are providing this, but we got to connect all the dots to make that attestation actually like trustworthy, right? Like, how do I know that that's a real attestation versus somebody just like made a fake one and put it on chain? Anyone can put anything on chain, and so unless you have like the technical expertise to be able to evaluate that on chain attestation to verify it, it gets a little bit sticky. But to get back to the original question, sorry, I'm a rambler.
You brought up another good point there. Like, it matters like who issued the credential. Like, if it was just like if you have a degree from somewhere, just because you have a degree in computer science, like, it's a big difference from if you got it from MIT versus like DevRai or something.
Yeah, right. Totally. Exactly. No, that's totally true. And that's the point that we're missing in Web3, is that like the web of trust around these attestations. And even like from a user attestation point, like verifying, like, say somebody from Octant wants to verify that I have good communication skills. And so they issue this attestation that says like, Trigs, he's a good communicator. There has to be some way to verify that that came from somebody in Octant, as opposed to, I could just say that somebody from Octant attested that I'm a good communicator and have some rando create that attestation. And sure, the attestation might look identical from face value, but then you look at the blockchain, records and history of where it came from, and you're like, wait, what's this wallet address? That's not like, but like the person from Octant has to be willing to like publicly announce what their wallet address is that they use to issue attestations. Otherwise, how could you ever verify where it came from, that it's a legitimate source? So it gets into these multi layers of verification that are necessary. What OpenCampus is doing is a lot simpler, because they're more of a centralized issuer of reputation, right? And so all that reputation attestations goes back to one central place that has its own web of trust. So as long as you're familiar with OpenCampus, you can trust any attestations that they make to some degree, because you already have that established trust with OpenCampus.
Yeah, absolutely. So that way, it's not just like you said, like any random person minting an attestation that looks exactly like that looks identical to the real one. Kind of
Yep.
reminds me when like like the NFT craze in 2021, there was a lot of fake NFTs as well. Like I remember they were
Mhm.
saying that like OpenSea was full of fake NFTs as well. I remember seeing people on YouTube talking about being upset about purchasing like an NFT they thought was the real one, but it was the fake one because they
Yeah, it
someone
was a
forged.
right click copy NFT.
Yeah, yeah, all day. It was a lot of that, and so
Yeah,
it's like,
totally.
but
But it gets back to the original question of like becoming a council member. And I think right now it's very accessible to join a council because a lot of these council programs are really new and experimental, and they don't have established procedures for onboarding people real clearly. It's a lot of just like you said, vibe check and give people a shot. And if you're good at it, you get to keep the job. And that, I mean, that's essentially how I got started, right? Like James just gave me a shot because we had a good vibe check in the kernel community. And he was like, all right, here's the council. We're going to go. Let's see how it goes. And apparently they appreciated the work that I did the first season because they invited me back to be a council lead in the second season. So I think that's really just how it goes right now is try to establish a good vibe check with the existing community and throw your hat in and see if you can, get your foot in the door. But once you get so this is like the beauty of Web3 to me is that getting your foot in the door is as easy as putting yourself out there, but getting the rest of your body in the door is work. So once you get your foot in the door, that's when the real work starts. You got to start grinding. You got to prove that you have the chops to be where you're at. And it doesn't matter what your resume is, doesn't matter how old you are, what country you come from, or any of those details. What matters is can you actually deliver, results? And you can't necessarily have that same sort of access in the traditional world. Like there's so much more red tape.
so
And
much more. Yep.
I definitely believe that Web3 is going to go that same direction because it's inevitable. Humans just create complexity. It's the nature of our, the way our brains are wired. I don't think that we're ever going to be able to live in this like global anarchist society where there's no rules and no procedures and everyone's just winging it all over the place. There's like, everything is a gradual process of refining procedures to be simpler, more accessible, but also, it has to it has to create guidelines that help things be successful. So for a grant council to be successful, there has to be some understanding of the purpose of the what the grant is trying to accomplish, right? Like Octant has their public goods rounds, and they are very specifically trying to grow this concept of like decentralized funding for public goods. But then there's other grant councils like Optimism's grants are specifically for growing optimism. And the Octant Community Grant, which is separate from their public goods grant, they have two different grant rounds now. So the community grant that I'm a part of is specific for growing the Octant community. And so with Octant, we have these two different grants. There's the public goods grants, and the purpose of those is very diverse. Anything that qualifies as a public good fits into this category. But with the Octant community grant, it's very specific about growing the Octant community. And so we're looking for people who have ideas about how we can tap into that and grow Octant specifically, not just general public goods. And so understanding that difference of what the purpose of the grant is extremely crucial. And so for the Octant Community Grant, what we're struggling with right now is figuring out like how do we define the goals of this grant council so that the council members have a clear picture of what they should be looking for. Because we're getting all kinds of applications that are great applications. They sound like great projects. They're things that people are like personally really excited about and they'd love to see it be successful. But we can't just throw money at every good idea. We have to throw money at the ideas that are going to accomplish our specific goals. And so we're having to like train council members on what types of things they should be approving and what types of things they should be not approving, regardless of the quality of the application or the personal interest in the application. And that's really hard to do. Like separating yourself from your personal biases is really challenging. And the only way you can really accomplish that effectively is through procedures, guidelines, establishing a narrative around your grant that is, really understandable. And so over time, this real long-winded rant is coming to a point. Over time, grant councils are going to become more difficult to join. Right now, it's kind of still wild, wild west territory. So it's a perfect opportunity to experiment, put yourself out there, find a project to get involved in, find a community that you like, and try to get involved in their funding allocation decision making. And that's how you build those skills that make you an effective council member for a grant council. Any DAO has funding allocation decisions that have to be made, whether they call themselves a grant council or not. If it's a DAO, that's what makes it a DAO, is collective decisions about funding allocations. And so any community you get involved in, you can start becoming a grant council member for that community, even if it's not an official title. But over time, as DAOs grow, as grant councils grow and get more complex, the barrier to entry is going to increase. And so getting that experience now when it's easy is the best time to do it. Over time, it's going to get more challenging. And things like OpenCampus providing courses are going to become more essential, because there might become a day where you can't be a grant council member unless you have an OpenCampus certification. Right now, nobody even really knows about an OpenCampus certification, but in 2 or 3 years, it might be the de facto baseline. Like, this is step one, get a certification. But right now, there is no step one. There's just go.
Right. Yes. It's pretty much just like word of mouth today. So, like obtaining that role is pretty much based upon the vibe check, and then if they're confident that you could still, deliver, then they could pretty much pick that up through the vibe check, and any other like references if they have one, but not completely necessary. But if somebody from the community vouches for you, that's pretty much your certification right there. But yeah, but as you said, like as infrastructure evolves within DAOs, and is more of a demand for these types of roles in the first place, then yeah, some type of certification would have to be there to validate that you can actually obtain this role, as opposed to just letting like someone's friend obtain the role like it is today. So that lets everyone know how early we are in this space, since the infrastructure is pretty much like around obtaining a role is pretty much being created as we speak. So if you want to obtain a particular role within a DAO, you're best off making some friends today, like actually joining some type of group chat, whether it's Telegram or Discord, and start communicating. And then in the meantime, be one of the people that actually take advantage of on-chain credentials, credentialing platforms such as OpenCampus, so that you can have an advantage, going forward by establishing an on-chain reputation before others have done so. Because right now, to establish your reputation on-chain, it's primarily done through just like voting on chain. Like it's not really so much social data about you. There's not really so much information about you and your skill set that's on chain yet. It's just pretty much, did you vote on this proposal? Did you post a proposal? Did it pass or fail? Did you vote yes or no? That's pretty much about it. That's pretty much all your DAO contribution on chain today. But in the near future, it's going to look very different. But one other quick question I had about Octant is, so as we were talking about the different types of rounds Octant has in terms of funding community rounds and public goods, I'm assuming this would apply to people that doesn't necessarily have to be tech savvy, right? Like, do they have to be somebody that's a builder of a protocol or some type of app to receive this type of funding? Or it could be something as simple as creating a podcast. Let's say somebody always wanted to create a podcast, don't exactly know what topic they want to do just yet. They just know they want to start a YouTube or something. This could be, if they do provide funding for this, this could be a way for them to actually receive a grant in order to start their podcast, especially if it's their dream. So imagine that, like, you can actually get some grant funding in order to start what family or friends might call a pipe dream of yours, but you can actually get a grant to validate that. And I don't know any other like grant systems where I can apply for like a government issued grant, or like to start a podcast. I think that would be wild. I haven't seen anything like that. But Web3 could actually fund your dreams, your pipe dreams, whatever it is. You can actually, if you have an idea and it sounds good, and you're able to portray that idea effectively to the community that's providing the grant, and you could get some startup capital for that, if that's something that Octant does fund. Have you guys ever funded any podcasts or any like non-technical products in the past?
Yeah, definitely. So, especially getting into the public goods side of Octant, they're really trying to not be focused on Web3 and tech specific. I mean, a lot of the grants that get issued are going to Web3 protocols that are building some sort of technical product, just because that's the ecosystem that we're starting in, and it's branching out from there. But a lot of it is education focused, especially for like other countries that have limited access, the unbanked kind of direction. And a lot of it gets into just like actual caring for people kind of things. I mean, public goods, that's really the goal, right? For them is to qualify as a public good, it has to be, something that is owned by the public. It's not privately owned. It's not owned by a centralized entity, and it's not gated. It's accessible by everyone. So, like a community good or an ecosystem good, like Optimism, what they're funding with their, retroactive grants and all that kind of stuff, it's not technically a public good because it's gated by the Optimism community. But Octant is not trying to gate it in that regard. It's trying to be completely open to the public. And so, if you wanted to start a podcast that you could qualify it as a public good per se, then yeah, totally, Octant would be interested in funding that. But that's the only criteria that would exclude you is if it qualifies as a private good. Like if you own the podcast and you're going to sell advertising for the podcast and you're keeping all the revenue that's generated from the podcast, like that's just a private good. That's not a public good in that regard. But if you wanted to create a public model for a podcast where all the people who fund the startup of the podcast become owners of the podcast and all the revenue is distributed to like public goods as like a micro grant kind of thing or something, then you could, I'm just like spitballing some crazy ideas, right? But the idea is as long as it is technically a public good, then anything qualifies. Like my favorite example is to compare it to how taxes work. So everybody pays taxes, and those taxes are used to build essentially public goods, roads, school systems, healthcare support, all those kinds of things, food support. That those are all qualify as public goods that everyone benefits from, but we all pay taxes for it. So Octant's building a system where we can choose what public goods we want to fund instead of just throwing all of our money into this generic tax bin and then other bureaucrats get to decide how it gets spent. No, the actual people who put the money in get to decide how it gets spent. But beyond that, anything that qualifies as a public good, Octant will throw money at it. If you could, but the thing is, like the people who are involved in the Octant ecosystem decide where the money goes. The Octant core team doesn't decide. So anybody who owns the GLM token, which is what's used to vote on Octant grants, gets to have a say in how the money gets spent. And they now have a quadratic funding set up that doesn't have a minimum issuance. Previous rounds, there was like you had to reach a certain like quota to qualify for a grant issuance. But now, once your project gets approved to the Octant Public Goods grant round, and it goes into the quadratic funding allocations, and whatever GLM holders vote for your project, that's how much funding you get. It might be $10, it might be $10,000, but you get whatever the community decides you deserve based on your application. So podcasts could totally qualify.
So, just so we could give a clear definition to this, and that's awesome too, by the way. But like a clear definition to like what a public goods podcast would look like. Like, let's say if somebody, it was their it's an interest of theirs to launch a podcast. Um, exactly how could they make it a public good or something similar to that, a public good? Let's say they wanted to do something like a clothing brand or something like that. How can that become a public good?
Yeah, so there's a definition of public goods that I think sets the stage for this. So public goods are non-rivalrous and non-excludable, meaning that one person's use of the good does not reduce its availability to others, and it's not possible to prevent someone from using the good. So like examples, this is just an AI summary. I just Googled it. So if it sounds like that, that's why. Examples of public goods include national defense, clean air, and public education. So a podcast could qualify under the public education component of it. What makes it specifically a public good podcast is that it's non-rivalrous and non-excludable. So And it's like really pushing my brain to drive through this example for a podcast.
I get where you're going with it though. It's like somebody could create a podcast to, like, let's say to educate the masses on how to you get started in Web3, like how to set up your MetaMask wallet or whatever wallet they want to teach someone to get started with, how to add different chains onto their wallet and whatnot. I guess, like, I'm just thinking of just some ideas off the top of my head. But if they're doing something like that, like let's say like the best public good I could possibly think of, well, it's not a podcast, but it would be Linux. It would be like
Yep.
someone went ahead and created an operating system that isn't commercialized like iOS or like Windows, for an example. And so like
Hmm.
Linux is just open for everyone. It's beautiful you using Linux, especially as a developer. For whoever's listening, when you become a developer, you're gonna definitely fall in love with Linux when you begin
Yeah.
putting your application together. And so like Linux is just open to anyone. It's just free technology. Just like there's a lot of because when I think of public goods, I could easily relate it to open source software, which allows anybody to use it. So I'm wondering if that type of ideology can bleed over into something like a podcast. Can a podcast become something that's a public good? Perhaps somebody creates a podcast. Like, for an example, before I understood how to write scripts in terms of obtaining data, because like what got me into web development was scraping Twitter. That's what I wanted to do at first, so I can understand what's going on in crypto Twitter. But anyway, I would watch tutorials on YouTube, and they were just people teaching me how to install Essence, Scrape, and just how to get started. Cause I didn't know what I was doing initially. I just knew I didn't want to pay another service. I won't say the name of the service, but I didn't want to pay them $500 a month to get an understanding of how many times a particular keyword was mentioned on Twitter. I know it was a better way to do it, and you can do it for free if you knew how to scrape. And then there was a bunch of people on YouTube that had tutorials on how to do so. So I'm thinking like a public good YouTube would be something like that. It would just teach somebody a particular skill. I don't want to spend too much time on this question. I mean, my brain is just going now. I'm just thinking of like how
Yeah.
this could apply to clothing and whatnot. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, it'd just be interesting to see if somebody could just get their dreams funded in this type
Yeah.
of way.
And just to kind of like button that up, expanding beyond the public goods thing, I mean, the same process that we're doing for Octant with their public goods can be applied to other types of public funding. And it's okay to have public funding that isn't funding public goods, right? It can still be funding a business. It's like Kickstarter is a great example of how much appetite there is for public funding for startup ideas. So if you wanted to start a clothing line, using public funding through a crypto platform is so much more effective than Kickstarter because of all the on-chain records that can be maintained and the attestations, the reputation that you can build as a funder of products. There's just so much that this rabbit hole goes all the way down endlessly once you start implementing blockchain technology into crowdfunding applications.
Absolutely. And as you was explaining that, it had me thinking of like when you have all this information on chain, just like what you can do with it is just like it's really up to your imagination. It's just for like the person whoever's listening to this and don't really fully understand what a blockchain is. It's really just an open database. It's like imagine if I'm gonna just pick a random company. Like imagine if Apple had a blockchain. Like they have an Oracle database. I'm sure of it. So like, well, I'm pretty sure they use Oracle, but they definitely have a database. And they, like somebody has access to that database. They have the super admin credentials in order to get into that and actually see what's in each table and column to know like how many iPhones you purchased in the last 5 years or something like that. But like the blockchain, it's open to everybody. So if you like, it's just a database that's open. And so if you run a particular business or whatever, you can actually see how people are engaging with it, and then you can reward them a certain way. Like this could even apply to like a grocery store, for an example. Like something that came to mind was, if you spend an X amount of money in the month of November before Thanksgiving, you get a free turkey. But like it could go way beyond that. Like imagine if they notice that you buy like a certain item collected, like you buy a certain item a lot, then you can get a deal. Like you could get a specialized deal on that because it's tied to the blockchain. Like let's say you had a digital identifier when you actually go to checkout for your item in a grocery store, and like it's tied to your digital identifier, which is your wallet address, or you can have some good wallet hygiene and have an ENS for your wallet, and so they know like your name dot eth. They know that that wallet likes to purchase filet mignon every now and then you can get like a special offer from that particular grocery store. Let's just say Whole Foods for an example. Then like every now and then you can get an offer on filet mignon or a different cut of steak or something like that. Just as an example, because it's on the blockchain and it's verifiable. It's not like they're playing like favoritism or anything like that. It's just anybody can check it and verify it and know exactly how you engaged with their products.
Yeah, I love that example, and I actually want to dive into that a little bit deeper if you don't mind.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
All right. So, what I think is super powerful about blockchain versus non-blockchain when it comes to this, like loyalty, you were describing a loyalty program for, and every company is leaning into these loyalty programs because they've realized how powerful loyalty programs are. But the problem with the loyalty program is that, like you said, the database is a closed, centralized database. So there's no verifiability, external verifiability. There's not even any way to know who's using the database, right? So let's say Whole Foods has your, because they currently have the ability to do what you described. If you just look at Whole Foods itself, right? Like they know your credit card number or whatever, or a phone number. They usually track it by a phone number, right? You put in your phone number at the grocery store, and it tracks everything that you're buying. So they're already tracking all that information. They know if you're buying filet mignon every Thursday, and they could start issuing like with a digital app. I've seen like Safeway, I know, has a digital app. Was it Safeway or Fred Meyer's? I don't remember. Somebody has a little app where they issue coupons directly to individuals based on their purchase history. But what makes the blockchain element so powerful is that it creates a valuable database that can be used externally, right? So I mean, the real value for Whole Foods, why they want to track all your purchases, partially is because they think they can push, products at you based on your purchase history. But also, what they really want is to sell your purchase history to other marketing companies so that they know what you're buying. And that's the part that's insidious about the current system. The value of blockchains is in the verifiability of that data to make it composable, because as a user you have absolutely no insight into who is being sold your data. Whole Foods and Facebook and Twitter and everybody else is selling all of your personal data to the highest bidder, and you get nothing from it. You have no access to that. You don't get a cut from that revenue, and you don't even know where it's being sold to and how it's being used. So now we're getting all these targeted ads. It's like, everybody knows that you like have a conversation in the real world with somebody about something, and 5 minutes later, Facebook is pushing you ads for that because somehow it knows. And it's crazy how invasive that is. The blockchain enables the ability for users to take control of that data. And so now all of your purchase history from Whole Foods is on a blockchain that you have control of. If we are recording this data in proper encryption, using encryption methods instead of just like a public database on Ethereum, if you used a blockchain where you have like zero knowledge proof of that attestation on chain, now all of a sudden you get there's a privacy element that's turned on, and you get to decide if you want to sell that data to Whole Foods or if you want to sell that data to whatever packaging company makes the filet mignons, that's your favorite brand. You could sell your purchase data directly to that meat manufacturing company and say like, hey, here's proof that I buy this every Thursday. And now they're going to issue a direct incentive outside of Whole Foods. It has nothing to do with Whole Foods. It has to do with you and the producer of the product that you're buying. They can advertise to you directly because you chose to let them have access to your data. That's where the blockchain element gets so much more powerful, because a standard loyalty program already exists. It's like a database is a database, right? But the verifiability and the composability of that data turns on a whole new world of opportunities for both consumers and producers.
Yeah, that's now we're deep down the rabbit hole. Now we started off just talking about how you
Yeah,
need to get a role somewhere, and now we're talking about owning your data and choosing how to monetize it yourself. Because that, I mean, shit, that could be a form of UBI right there, universal basic
absolutely.
income, by being able to, because like somebody's already making money off your data. Well, not somebody. There's a whole bunch of people making money off your data,
Hmm.
right? And in that scenario that you brought up, how you can have a conversation with somebody, and then all of a sudden you get an ad. That's pretty much because, like, you know how there's certain apps you can use and it'll ask for like access to your microphone, or like it'll ask for like there's certain things you can allow it access to, like your photos, and your
Yeah.
microphone is one. So your phone is listening to you all the time because you given this application access to the microphone, and now that it has access to the microphone, you could bet that they're gonna use it, and shit. And now with like AI becoming much more sophisticated, it could pretty much summarize all your conversations and push all types of ads to you, and it's just gonna get even more invasive. I mean, I could spend more time on this. Cause I do. I saw a video on how Facebook gets this information, and like how they let me check this out. How they acquired this company. They didn't do it themselves, but um, they acquired this company. I can't remember the name of it, but it was some type of it started off as some type of security company. But anyway, they used it and like reverse engineered it when they bought them out, and it actually knows how to get information from your phone outside of the Facebook app, because Facebook's really only supposed to get information about you from Facebook, but it knows how to circumvent that and get information about you just from your cell phone data, in which an app isn't supposed to do that, but they found ways to get around that by acquiring certain companies. And so they took
Yeah.
a company that was designed to protect your phone against that and reverse engineered it to get all the information. Pretty much like
Yeah,
that.
it's pretty wild. Just like another crazy example of that is the company 23andMe. They do the DNA testing. So 23andMe has DNA records of a massive number of people. I don't even remember the number. I was reading something about it at one point. But if you look at the stock price of 23andMe, like somebody could buy the entirety of the 23andMe company or majority shares or whatever, and it was like a few $1 million or something like that. It was crazy how low the price was, and the company itself isn't really worth that much money because they're not really producing anything of value. But
Hmm.
the data that they have is insanely valuable
Yeah.
because it's everybody's person. And if you bought 23 and the majority shares of 23andMe's stocks, and you would gain control of all that data, you would own that data because you own the company, because everyone who submits their data signs over ownership to
Hmm.
23andMe, and
That's
now
scary.
23andMe owns it forever.
Hmm.
And the same thing's happening on everything is every company is a data company now. And that's why
Yeah.
blockchains are the most important technology of the future, because it's the only way that we can enable people to retain ownership and sovereignty over their data.
Absolutely. Then you got me thinking back to when we were talking about Whole Foods, for an example, right? And you know how they either have like your email on file from your Amazon account, or even worse, your phone number. Like that right
Yep.
there is like your phone number is like right now that's pretty much your digital identity, is that phone
Yep.
number. And it really shouldn't be, because somebody at like one of these major cell phone companies, like when people think of where I'm getting at is SIM swaps. And
Yep.
so you don't have to be this like legendary hacker in order to get access to this data. No, you don't gotta do none of that. All you gotta do is go in there, flash a few $1,000s to somebody that works at one of these cell phone companies, and just say, look, I'll break you off something. I want the SIM card to this person right here. Like you can
Yeah.
do that, and like that's how it's pretty much done. I've seen some videos on YouTube like that, and like that's how people that's pretty much how they do it. You don't have to be this genius hacker to get this
Mhm.
information, although you could do that too. But like just the fact that all your data is tied to your cell phone, that's horrible OPSEC. And the way how
Mhm.
the blockchain could change that is it'll be your wallet address instead. And then as long as you like manage your wallet in a way that's secure as well, I would suggest even setting up a multi sig with yourself and just have
Yeah.
yourself be a signer on all of them, even if it's only you. Like have a multi-sig of at least 3 signers on it, and you have to sign in with 3 different wallets to like control your wallet. But like if but I feel like that's um, a much more secure method of sharing some type of information about yourself with a company. I'd rather share the wallet address than my phone number. Like your phone number, you'd be screwed sharing that. If that getting in the
Yeah,
wrong hands.
for sure. Just so I don't forget, I sent you a link to an article I wrote, The Attention Economy. It ties into the conversation we were having about data ownership. It's like a run through of kind of just an example of what a blockchain enabled data economy could look like versus what we currently have. Might be something to link in the podcast or something just for additional reading.
Oh yeah, definitely. I'm opening the link now and just scrolling through. So yeah, we can
Yeah, just kind of
definitely
like dive into what a social media like data economy would look like if users had sovereign control of their data and they could monetize it, as they saw fit. And like you said, there's an UBI element to it, and this kind of just like shows what the economic flow would be for everyone to actually monetize their own data. And it dives into like how AI uses data too, because I think that's the real. We don't have to keep diving down that rabbit hole because I could talk about that all day.
Hell yeah.
But AI is gonna completely change the face of the world. I mean, the way that we interact with technology is completely going a totally new direction, and it's all because of AI. And AI only exists because we gave away all of our data for free over the last decade.
Yeah, yeah, that's how you create a large language model. You need a ton of data for it to actually
Yep. So
for
all
be
the
efficient.
value, all the money that's pouring into AI right now is being stolen from the people building the AI tools because they built that value off of the data that they took for free from us because we all signed it away when we did the terms and conditions of Facebook and Reddit and Twitter and all these other social media apps.
Absolutely, that gives me some ideas with the app that I'm working on as to how to share the equity with the people that actually created the platform, essentially. Because DAO space, what I'm working on, it wouldn't exist without the people that contributed to the DAO space in which we got the data from. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah,
definitely
there's
want
a
to see.
chain. There's chain of custody on the blockchain. When you build things the right way and you have data sovereignty, there's a chain of custody that shows exactly where everything came from. And the composability of that is what's so powerful because, sure, maybe DAO space doesn't necessarily generate a ton of profit. I'm just like saying theoretically, maybe DAO space isn't going to be this big Facebook that gets a $10 million evaluation or $10 billion evaluation or whatever someday. But the data that DAO space produces could create value for everyone who contributed to that, creating that data through other people using the data that DAO space has aggregated, right? Like you could become a distributor of data that is like a marketplace, and the users who created the data have this, a chain of custody that shows that they were involved in producing this value, and they can be compensated automatically just using the information on the blockchain. And so now all of a sudden DAO space is this like data marketplace that individuals are making a living just because they contributed to the data that makes it valuable.
Yeah, and I feel like I guess where that would make sense if they was to sell the like some level of private data, not like messages or anything like that, but perhaps like some bodies of like of work. Because like I have a ton of Google Docs and a ton of notes on my phone. Like it would be interesting to be able to sell that or like get access to some early notes from like Vitalik Buterin would be very interesting to get access to that data. I just think it would be difficult to sell public data since it's public and anybody could get access to it if they really wanted it that bad. But I definitely would love to jam on some more ideas around this and data sovereignty. 'Cause I have some ideas actually around this and would love to talk about that. Although that would be future use cases for DAO space. And this is the last question I have for you. This is a question I like to ask everybody on the podcast about the differences between Web3 and traditional work. So, what were some of your best experiences working in Web3, and how do you compare working in Web3 to Web2? Like, what made you want to stay in Web3, basically?
I guess kind of coming off the tail of the data sovereignty, so I'm glad that we went through all that before we got to this question. The one thing that drives me the hardest to participate in the Web3 economy is the potential of data sovereignty. I think that it's the most crucial battle that we're facing in today's modern world. And Web3 is the only path that enables users to retain sovereignty of their data. So I got tired of working in the Web2 world because I saw how everything that I did created a pyramid scheme of funneling money to the top. The corporate business model, the tech model, all of this is designed for the people at the top to make the most. That's why you see these tech leaders that have, insane amounts of money, because the entire economic system was structured for all the value to flow as far up the chain as possible. And that's a broken economic model that's designed to keep the majority of people in poverty. And so I refuse to participate in that economy. So for me, being a part of Web3 is about empowering every single individual to retain the value that they create and not have it just extracted by somebody else who's a shark who has more business acumen and knows how to extract value, because that's not valuable. These rich tech moguls who've extracted all the value out of the hard work of everyone else, they don't deserve that money. They didn't earn it. They just were better at funneling that money upwards than everyone else. And the economic model is designed to reward people who are that way. And it's a complete false narrative that they're somehow like smarter than the rest of us in terms of like what they're actually producing. Anybody could do what they do with the opportunity. Not anybody. I mean, I'm over exaggerating here, but like everyone has unique value. And just because somebody's a shark doesn't mean that they deserve to be on top. And so Web3 enables a world where equitable value can be, people can retain equitable rewards for the value that they create without it being taken away by somebody else who's sharkier than they are.
That's an interesting point that you brought up because, yeah, people like I'm just thinking of like different like social media apps as you're talking about that. And if it wasn't for the users, then the app would be meaningless. It's just like, cause you've ever seen like a prototype of a social media app? Okay, you can upload a picture, you can make a post. It's almost the same thing. You could just like use inspect element all day and just like fork a app. If it's not already open source, you could just copy it. So like just creating the application isn't really groundbreaking. It's really the ability to market that product. I feel like they're way better. Like whoever like dominates like within a certain social media platform is because they were way better at telling a story, I guess, like than the average person.
Yeah, for sure. And we also like just like on the social media side of it, we're stuck in this point where like you nailed it. It's the people that create the value. There's a statistic out there that like a certain percentage of people on the internet are just lurkers. Like 10% of the people are actually content creators, and the rest of us just consume content. But those 10% that actually create content create no value if people aren't actually watching it, clicking it, liking it, staring at it for long enough. Yeah, all that kind of stuff is where the value is created.
Yeah, you got me
And
thinking that. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, just like the reason why these Web2 social platforms are so dominant is because they already have the user base. Everyone has a Facebook account. Most people have a Twitter account. Most people have a Reddit account. They got that first mover advantage of establishing a functional user experience that taps into the need that humans have to connect with each other and share information and knowledge. And so, because they were the first ones to take advantage of that human need, nobody questioned data sovereignty at that point. I mean, if you dig through my blog history, I got a post on the history of cyberpunks and cypherpunks and lunar punks and solar punks and all that stuff. And it kind of explains how long we've been talking about this. I mean, data sovereignty has been a number one question since the late 80s. That's how long people have been talking about data sovereignty. But nobody cares because it's so esoteric. It doesn't make sense. We can't wrap our heads around what the value of data actually is. But now that we have AI technology, it starts to become more relevant what the value of this data is. But we can't replicate what Facebook and Reddit and Twitter and these early movers, we can't replicate the success that they had because everyone already has those accounts and nobody wants to start a new account because there's no network effects on these new accounts. Farcaster is finally starting to break into it because they have a little bit of network effects. But the number one complaint about Farcaster is always that it's a very small, insular little clique of people, and it's hard to break into that. And that's what every new social media app comes into is like, it just turns into a little tiny click and it never grows beyond that bubble because there's no network effects.
Right.
So I think in order for something to really like take over that social media point, it has to provide a user experience that is unlike anything else that we've seen. You can't just replicate Twitter and be like Warpcast is trying to
Exactly.
do that to some degree, but they've hit that roadblock of like it's still just a Twitter alternative and it doesn't provide anything new. But now there's all these apps that you can build on Farcaster on top of that. It's like, oh, there's new functionality, a new user experience. Oh, we can have on-chain governance right out of our Twitter-esque, user interface. That's interesting. Funding allocations can now be performed directly out of this, Twitter interface. That's crazy. That's something new. So as we develop these new user experiences, we're going to have to it's an opportunity to integrate data sovereignty, because if you just try to sell it on data sovereignty, nobody's going to
Yeah,
buy it.
yeah, they're not gonna
You
care.
got
The
to
average person not gonna give two shits about that unless it offers a way for them to generate income. Then I think that would get them interested. That would
Right, but you
pique their
can't start with
interest.
income because the income's only there if the network effect exists, right? So
Exactly.
it's like a chicken and the egg situation all over again.
Yeah, because what got me thinking of that is like how we were talking about, it's the people on the platform that brings the value. So like, imagine if like the people that act like the actual users were paid based upon the amount of value that they bring to the platform. Imagine if you can receive some type of compensation because you make really good recommendations. Like I was looking for information on how to for an example, the reason why I experienced, I know I didn't start this conversation yet, but like when I experienced Decentraland for the first time, and for people that don't know, Decentraland is pretty much like one of the first metaverses in Web3. But anyway, I really wanted to play this game. I've seen a lot of hype, like it was a lot of hype around the metaverse, like right after the NFT craze of 2021. So I really wanted to experience Decentraland for myself. But on my laptop at the time, I had that laptop for a few years. It was old. It couldn't handle the game. It wouldn't render certain things. Like I couldn't see other players in the game. I couldn't talk to, well, obviously since I couldn't see other players, it was just my character walking around. I couldn't add friends. I couldn't message anybody. So it was boring, and like I didn't get the real feel of the game. I couldn't even move my character like at a normal speed. It would move in slow motion, and so I had to look up, well, how do you play a game on an old laptop? And then I saw information on a Reddit on a Reddit account. It was for, I think it was called low end gaming or something like that, and somebody suggested using a virtual machine. And then like it would be interesting if the person that made the suggestion on using a virtual machine for gaming receives some type of compensation for that, because
Yeah.
yeah, I mean even if like it allowed me to tip him would be cool, but
Yeah.
yeah, just
Yeah, that's interesting. That's a great example. I think about that all the time because I rely so heavily on random comments on the internet to provide access to the solutions that I'm looking for. And there's no, like, I try to think about like how do you systematically address this? And it's hard because a lot of times it's just like I'll read 15, 20 different comments on all these different websites, Reddit and YouTube videos and forums and all over the place. And I'll just come across one person and they'll say one thing, and something about the way that they framed it, the context that they provided with it, it just like really sticks out to me as like this is a potential answer to the problem that I'm looking at. And there's no rhyme or reason as to it other than just like a gut feel. I'm like, this guy sounds like he knows what he's talking about. I'm going to check into this. And I ignore all the other comments. I'm like, that guy's an idiot. That person doesn't know what they're talking about. I already tried that. That didn't work. Or like, this person's clearly selling something, and you just kind of like intuitively filter out the stuff that doesn't matter. But when you find that nugget where you're just like, man, this person nailed it. If without this person, I never would have solved this problem. There's no way to, like you said, there's no way to compensate them or give them acknowledgement. Farcaster is kind of starting to go that route because they have like live tipping. You can just like tip people all these different tokens on Farcaster if you like their comment. So we're kind of moving that direction, but I don't think we're ever going to get there until I can just like push a button when I'm on Reddit and be like, this comment on Reddit did the trick. That was the one. It solved my problem. Because we're not going to get people off Reddit, in my opinion, or Facebook or whatever.
yeah, right, unless yeah, because the suggestion I was gonna have was gonna be too cumbersome unless you somehow acquire all the data from Reddit, scrape the hell out of Reddit, and then use AI to make sense out of the comments and then reward the top commenters. And the only way I could really think of doing that now, even though I don't know how sustainable it will be, although it will be kind of fun, would be just come up with like a meme token or something like that, like a meme coin to reward valuable contribution to a social platform. So if even if you haven't, like, let's say you contribute to a DAO for an example, and you're given great feedback, but you don't hold any role in the DAO. You just happen to leave critical feedback on proposals on forums because you just you believe in the DAO's vision and you really want to see it go in the right direction. And so just imagine like a platform just distributed like a meme coin to that person as like a token of appreciation, pretty much. I think that'll be kind of interesting. I think for a use case for a meme coin, so at least there's like, especially if they would go about it as like an airdrop type of thing, if they airdrop to like very specific people. And then, like, can you imagine like somebody that's just been leaving like high quality comments on Reddit for years, teaching people how to make a virtual machine? Because in essence, they're a content creator, even if they don't go as far as making a YouTube video and editing it and all that stuff. They still took the time out to put some content up there on Reddit that's going to pretty much better somebody's life to a certain extent, or at least give them the answer that they're looking for. And because that was like that just by learning about that virtual machine, that's what got me interested in Akash. Because then because then I wanted to learn more about not just decentralized computing, just computing in general, cloud computing, because I wasn't really familiar with it. Obviously I knew what it was, but I never experienced it for myself until I created a virtual machine. And that just blew my mind, that you can share the someone else's computer resources on your machine, like having a computer in a computer. And I would have never known that if it wasn't for Reddit. And it would just be interesting if Reddit has like just rewarded people like that. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, totally. The trick in my mind always, because I've seen a lot of experiments with this, especially in Farcaster, but you know, the meme coin thing, and the having the AI like algorithmically identify top comments or whatever. And everything always becomes gameable, right? That's the problem, is the gamification of it, and people figure out how to game that. So like, how do you determine what the best Reddit comments are? Is it just the amount of likes that they have, the upvote to downvote ratio? Yeah, you're right. Like, so we need some format, like you said, of like, we were talking about, if something was helpful to you, you need a way to signify that in like a verifiable blockchain, you know, kind of way. Be like, this solved my problem, or this was helpful, and building that kind of attestation ecosystem.
Yeah, it's like leaving a Google review. You go somewhere and you have an excellent experience somewhere, and you say, you know what, I'm gonna go home and write a review about this person. And like, but even though you could kind of game that too, you could definitely game that too.
Yeah, everything's gameable for sure. Like, there's a constant evolution. This is what the conclusion that I've come to with blockchain stuff is that we're never gonna solve the problem. We're just going to keep iterating ahead of the like failures, right? Like, we try something, doesn't work, iterate, improve, try it again, and it works a little better. If something else doesn't work, you know, iterate, improve. And we just got to stay ahead of the game, right? Like, every new feature that comes out, somebody's going to figure out how to game it, and then we figure out how to foil the gamer, improve the system. And eventually it'll just keep getting better step by step. I mean, that's what society does. We've been doing that ever since Sticks and Stones. We just keep improving the way that we communicate, the way that we build trust. And blockchain is just another tool to do that same thing.
Well, man, I really enjoyed this conversation, and we're going to put together some great content around it, man. Once again, really appreciate you for your time, and looking forward to collaborating more often for sure.
Yeah, we talked about like 6 product ideas that we should have a deep dive on later.
Hell yeah, definitely, and definitely around data sovereignty. I'll share some ideas that I have for that. It kind of like utilizes ENS. I'll just give I'll just give a hint to what it's. I'll just give some information. Fuck it. All right, so I had an idea of using ENS, but to name like for like file types, as opposed to just like just using it for your name, for an example, like just using it as a replacement for a username. But like, what if either you come up with a different extension, but it becomes like a file type, and then I guess I'll say the name, because I was inspired by the game Cyberpunk 2077, and they have shards, and I was thinking of naming the file .shard, and your .shard could be your social data or like whatever data you want it to be, and then you can pretty much monetize your .shard file, and then it's like an immutable file that lives forever. And there's something else we didn't touch upon, or I forgot to mention when we were talking about databases and sovereign, having like a sovereign identity, is the fact that a database could be easily be manipulated as well. If somebody get those login credentials to your MySQL account, then that's it. You can just delete all the tables. And in some instances that would be beneficial for someone with their like, let's say they have debt in a bank and the bank gets hacked and everyone's debt get wiped out. I think that happened in Mr. Robot, right, when they deleted a bunch of data from Evil Corp and stuff. So like,
yeah,
there's instances of that, but like with the blockchain, you can't delete blockchain data. So that's the benefit there. But I was thinking of having an immutable like way to share data and files about yourself. So like, let's say Vitalik Buterin had like a it don't have to be that much, but let's just say he had a folder of notes that he'd taken throughout the years and like ideas that he had that led to Ethereum. Somebody might want that type of information, and if they do want it, he can sell it as a .shard file. I'm thinking of it being a file type, and then you open it, and then it opens like how a .SQL file will open. So if you take a .SQL file and you put it in a SQL viewer, then you can just view the database. But I'm thinking like, you just click into the file. You don't have to like go to a SQL viewer website and upload it. You just click it, and it just has an interface. Just like if you open up an MP3 file, it still has an interface, as a play button, rewind forward, and you just launch the file, and then you can just see all this data, and then share. I'm thinking like this is a way that you can easily train AI with, and just acquire a bunch of .shard files, feed the shard files. Especially if it's already structured, then you wouldn't have to spend so much time setting up particular parameters when you create a large language model.
Yeah, dude, as soon as you said AI, I was like, I'm 100% in. Just being able to drop a shard into an AI, like imagine it, because I'm all into local AI, right? Like this whole cloud AI stuff is not the answer, because there's no way to have like sovereign control over cloud AI. You need to have a local AI that runs within an encrypted hardware environment on your local device, so you can ensure that nobody is fucking with your, sorry, language. Nobody's messing with your AI, tool on your local device. And then if you want to run a specific, parameter set, like you said, or whatever, you can just take somebody's shard file, drop it into your local AI, completely secure because it's behind, a hardware, a firewall or whatever. You're completely secure in your environment. And then you have this AI that is trained on all these customized parameters and data that you can use locally. And you can pop a new one in, you can pop a couple in and combine them. Oh, it would be a beautiful solution. I absolutely love it.
Yeah, let's hack at it, man. Let's begin working on that. Like, I'm definitely down to do this.
Cool.
It's definitely an idea that I have that I wanted to start working on. I was thinking years later, but it's something it'll be fun to hack at it. And like you said, we mentioned like at least 6 or 7 different product ideas. So feel free to hit me up on Telegram anytime. And man, once again, thank you for being a guest on New Money. Really appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been a blast. I'll see you around.
All right, talk to you soon.